Hey everyone, today's version of the Logi patch that I'm going to show you is using a directional print and also using a pre-made zipper. This is 17.5 inches. You want to be at least 17 inches. This is just the ones that I had in my stash already. For this version, you need the pattern piece cut on the solid line here because you'll need that extra seam allowance to piece together your vinyl. And same as last time, all the various supplies, your cutting implements, stapler, your pliers for removing staples, double-sided tape, fray check, lighter, and pattern weights. So the first thing that we're going to do is take our pattern piece, and we are going to cut two pieces, both with the print the right side up. So this is the bottom here, so you want your fabric facing this way, and then you can cut your two identical pieces. If you have a pattern that you want to match up, then what I often do is cut the first piece and then I flip it over and then I line it up so that I can match up the picture. So let's say I wanted to line up all the ovals, that's how I would do it. So let's get started. Now we have our two identical pattern pieces that are cut to the solid line. Now what we're going to do is put them right sides together, lining up the bottom seam here. And then we're going to clip along the bottom. Like so. And then I'm just going to take this over to the sewing machine and I'm just going to sew down here at 3/8 of an inch. The next thing that we're going to do now that we've sewn that bottom seam is top stitch it open. So on the inside of this pouch, you can see that you have the seam there. You can see it on the inside. So we're going to fold it open and then we're going to stitch it down so that it reinforces the seam and it looks neater and it is flatter on the inside. Before we do that, I'm just going to trim my threads here, as you will be able to see all of that on the inside of the bag. So you want to make sure that it's nice and neat. What I like to do is grab my double-sided tape. And I'm going to put a little bit on each edge here. And then I'm going to fold those down before we take it over to the machine. Now that we've got those seam allowances folded out, I'm going to top stitch down the center seam here. I'm using a 4mm stitch length. The way that I like to do it to minimize the threads is start at one end, go straight down one side of the seam, almost right to the end, back stitch one, then I rotate 90 degrees, sew across the seam, come back, raise my needle, line it back up the correct distance that I want from my center seam, lower the needle, back stitch again, and then straight back down the other side. Stitch, finish it off, and then that way I only have the loose seams at one end instead of at both ends, and then I will go and I will finish those off so that I don't have those loose threads on the inside. So I'm just going to finish off these ends here, and you can see that this pattern piece that we have now is the same as we had in the original version that just used one single piece of vinyl. So you can use your pattern to double check that it is the correct size. Sometimes if your seam allowance is a little bit off, your piece will be a little smaller or a little bigger. If it's a little bigger, you can trim it down. If it's a little smaller, don't worry. This is a fairly forgiving pattern, and I don't think you will have any trouble still getting it together. It just means that when you go to box these corners, they might be off slightly. So you can take your piece, make sure that it is correct, and if you look there, that's perfect. So if you're going to be doing the double zipper pull or using zipper by the yard, you can follow along the same way as we did in the original video. With this one today, I'm going to be using a pre-made zipper. So we are going to mark the center of our pattern piece the same way as we did in the other version. Slightly different this time. Because we are using the pre-made zipper, we need to have a longer tail on one side than on the other side. So instead of folding it in half and marking the center, we're going to offset it a little bit so that the closed end of the zipper is about 2 inches longer. You want to have this piece here between your pull and the center to still be about 8 inches. So you can measure that on your mat. Okay, and that's 8 inches there. So I'm going to snip at that point rather than in the center. Same on both sides. And then the same as we did with the other one, about 2.5 inches down. For about 2.5 inches, you're going to put those little snips into your zipper. Remembering that we will need to apply fray check or melt those so that they don't fray inside of our bag. Just the little snips to help it go around the curve. Now we're going to take our double-sided tape. Whoopsie. Grab that. Going to need that. And we're going to do the same as we did in the other version and apply it around the top and the bottom. I'm going to stop here briefly to apply my tag. Same as the other one. Measure in from the sides. That's how I like to do it. And it's 11 inches and I put it here where it's 5.5. So I'm going to do that quickly now before we put the zipper on, because it'll just be a little bit easier to do it without having the zipper in the way. Now that my tag is on, I'm ready to put on my zipper. You can decide which way you want your zipper to go. If your bag looks the same on both sides, then it doesn't matter which way you go. I prefer to work from left to right, probably because I'm right-handed. I like to have my tag on the front, but obviously when people get the bag, they can face it either way. The first thing that we're going to do is peel off this double-sided tape on one side here. Take your zipper, open it up. Your pull now is going to be at the closed end on the right-hand side if you're doing it the same way as me. Flip it over because it stays as one piece, and you're going to match up your mark at the 8-inch point with the top of the zipper. With the top of the vinyl rather. And you're going to just curve it around the same way as we did in the other version. Sticking it down on the tape, trying to get it as close to the edge as you can. Going around the other curve the same way. Pressing it down. Flip it around, lining up your center. Well, I guess you got to remove the tape first. Tape out of the way. Sticking that down, going all the way around, pressing it down, repeating for each of the curves. And now we're going to go over to the sewing machine, and then using a zipper foot, we're going to sew around here and around here. I like to use the width of my zipper foot as my seam allowance. Whatever your preferred seam allowance is, anywhere from 1/4 to 3/16 of an inch will work just fine. The next step is to seal these threads at the end there, whether you want to use fray check or to melt them. And we're also going to snip into our corners using our scissors. I'm going to do my snips first, and then I'm going to do fray check on the threads at the same time as I do fray check on my notches. Now I'm going to apply fray check to all of my triangle notches here and over the end of my seams. I didn't mention before, but in case you haven't seen the other video, when you're cutting your notches, make sure that you're only cutting part way into the zipper. You don't want to go all the way to your seam. Otherwise, you'll cut through your stitches. So you just want to snip into it a little bit just to allow you to take the curves nicely when you turn it to top stitch. So fray check on the ends, or you can melt it with your lighter. And then once that's dry, we will turn it around and we will be ready to top stitch it. Now this is coming together pretty quickly. So let's get that dry and then we'll do the next step over at the machine. What we're doing now is top stitching this zipper. We're going to fold it underneath and just roll the seam to get a nice crease there, and then we're going to top stitch along this edge. I use 1/8 of an inch and a 4mm stitch length. Back stitching at the start. And then as we go, we're just going to keep tucking that zipper underneath, paying special attention at the curve and going nice and slowly if you need to. Now we're going to finish off our ends of our seams again. Something that is fairly important that I probably should have mentioned earlier when we were first attaching our zipper is that you want to be very careful that your zipper at the end here is not twisted. You want to make sure that there's no twists in it here at this end, otherwise it won't zip up properly. If you do sew it on and then you realize that there are twists, then you would have to unpick it to take the twists out, or you can always cut the end off and then follow along with the original zipper installation that we did in the first video when you use a zipper by the yard, if you feel confident that you would be able to get your pull back on. These pre-made zippers are not as easy to get the zipper pulls on as the zipper by the yard that is designed for that. So just make sure that it's not twisted. But mistakes are how we learn. So, all right. Now that that is all finished up, let's make sure that our zipper is good. You can zip it up. It's not going to come off the end on this one because it's got the pull, the stops at the end there. So you can see that that comes together nicely. Now what we need to do is box the corners. This one here is going to be a little harder to box than on the other version because the zipper is going to be open. So what we're going to do is turn it out the other way. Now this time, because we have got the seam here, we don't have to mark the middle because we can already see where the middle is there. Pull that zipper up a bit, and then you're just going to line up your center seam there with the center of your zipper teeth. Grab your stapler and pop a couple of staples in there to keep it in place inside your seam allowance. Now, the other end is where it gets a little trickier. So, push your teeth together and line up the edges there. What you can do if you want to is have your zipper on top of it like that, and you can hand stitch a couple of stitches over the teeth there, and then that will hold them together nicely. Or you can just line it up one side at a time, getting your teeth just over the middle there where the seam is going to be, and put a staple here. And then the same thing on the other side. Now, it's okay if there is a slight overlap in the teeth here because they are going to come together when you close it. So again, lining it up to the middle, and then just pop a staple in, and then one more staple over the top there. Try to keep your zipper stops lined up and the ends lined up so that you know your zipper is good. And pop one more staple in, and then we're going to go over to the machine and we're going to sew that at 3/8 of an inch at either end. So I'm going to be sewing down here at 3/8 of an inch, and then I'm going to sew another seam just inside of that one, inside the seam allowance. Remembering when I get to the zipper, I'm going to go back and forth a couple of times to make sure that the zipper pull doesn't come off, just reinforce that seam a little. I prefer when I am sewing these to sew with the staple side prongs down. If you are finding that your machine is giving you trouble too, then you can pull them out before you sew your second seam there too. Final steps of this version before we will be done. Pull your staples out if you have not already removed them. Then we are going to finish these seam ends here. We're going to snip the end of our zipper, melt it so that it doesn't fray, and then we'll be ready to turn it out and have a look and see how it looks with the pre-made zipper and the directional print. So however you like to finish your threads, you can do that. And then just snip that, being careful again not to cut into where you have sewn your zipper. Remembering too that you will be able to see this inside of the bag, so you want to keep it as neat as you are able to. I'm going to melt that real quick, and then I'm going to finish up these ends. I'm going to snip it and add a little bit of fray check. Sometimes I'm out, sometimes I do fray check, just depending on how I'm feeling that day. No method to it, just what I feel like doing. If you have any little loops, if you just pull your thread on the other side, it should pull that loop through to be nice and tight. Grab a fray check, a couple of little dabs there. And now we are ready to turn it out. Just move some of this rubbish out of the way. Okay, and now I like to take my thumb, push it right into the corner there, right into the corner. Unzip that the rest of the way. Push it out so it's got a nice sharp corner. Nice sharp corner. Put your zipper under. And zipper up. And there you have it. The print is going the right way up on both sides. It has the little seam in the bottom there, reinforced by the top stitching, and this one with the single zipper pull. And there you have it. The next one that I'm going to work on is going to be a lined version, so I'll look for that video up hopefully in the near future. Thanks everyone, bye.